class, and today in this video we are going to talk about the write-up of Bal Sitaram Mardhekar, commonly called as B.S. Mardhekar, and his very famous critical essay titled as Poetry and Aesthetic Theory. Poetry and Aesthetic Theory, an introduction. Poetry is treated as equal to other kinds of arts. Poetry deals with words as carriers of emotional meanings. The intimate apprehension of emotional meaning is a biological necessity for both existence and perpetuating species. The attraction of poetry is natural and helps in the above process, says Mardhekar. So, poetry is the best example for understanding and analyzing the aesthetic problems. The aesthetic discussion must be carried on only on words when we take into consideration poetry. Poets are men with special facility in handling and manipulating linguistic symbols, which would induce their opinions to all men without challenge, either by explicit aesthetic formulation or by recording their own reactions through poetry. Benedict Croatian Aesthetics, T.S. Eliot's The Art is a Pattern of Criticism, Aya Richards, A Speculative Instrument for the Investigation of Aesthetic Problems, are the wonderful influence on Mardhekar. So the entire field of aesthetic science should have a common principle of judgment, says Mardhekar. The temptation is to interpret all artistic creation and every aesthetic process with those involved in the process of creation. Now, this soon becomes the habit of the mind. And hence, poetry is a fine art because it yields enjoyment, says Mardhekar, and its products and processes necessarily partake the character of works of art and aesthetic process. But there could be error that is possible to this. Number one, either in the first step, which is the preliminary analysis is defective, or in the second step, there is a slight shifting in the placing of the terms of one process with the other so that they don't really correspond with each other. At both the levels, there could be an error possible, either in the first step of analysis itself or in the second step of slightly shifting in the placing of the terms. Poetry then becomes an ambiguous term, and poetic interpretation becomes illegitimately extended to the aesthetic theory. And one cannot enjoy like a fine art, says Mardhekar. If these two problems are there in the analysis or in the criticism of a poem, one cannot really enjoy poetry as a fine art. Then what is to be done? To remove this ambiguity in poetry, we need to look at the medium of poetry, says Mardhekar. But it is very difficult to understand the medium of poetry and its criticism. Why? Because the medium of criticism and the medium of poetry are the same. What is the medium of criticism and poetry? Words. For example, a painter uses colors to represent the painting. We analyze the colors and put the criticism in words. So, colors are different and words are different. We are expressing our criticism in words, the criticism of colors. But for poetry, the medium that is used to write poetry is words, and criticism also is in the same language with words. So the medium and the criticism are exactly same for poetry. That is words. Poetry is written in language and criticism also is in the same language using the same words. The beauty sought in the poem is in the medium, the colors. So the aims of the painter and the literary artist are different. Poetry that is written by Professor Spearman, which is titled as The Principles of Literary Criticism, and Literary Criticism and the Principles of Literary Criticism written by Abercrombie, Art as Experience written by John Dewey, have influenced Mardhekar a lot in analyzing poetry in a very systematic way. It is language that is used as a medium to express thoughts, emotions, feelings using words, right? And every word has got two aspects. One is sensational and the other is intentional. So a word is a phenomena of sound, a complex of auditory sensations, a group of vowels and consonants. In language, these sounds are not significant in themselves, but only as they serve as symbols for something else. The sounds are subsidiary to the second aspect, that is, intentional. The intentional aspect is the sole justification of the existence of that particular combination of vowels and consonants. Yes or no? And hence, he says, the evolution of meaning is a positive construct thought, which thought is essentially a function of a limited consciousness. With more frequent interactions, the more complex they grow, the less certain they become with less use. Yes or no? Many meanings might emerge of the same over the time. The same word can give many meanings at different contexts in different situations. The incipient thoughts gather weight and volume and crystallize into words. The sound aspect of the word is symbolic of the intentional and is only used as manageable vehicle for it. Right? And hence, this combination of the two aspects. What are the two aspects? The thoughts and the words. Both the thoughts and the words is at once a boon as well as a bane in poetry. How is that? In a world of partial or divided consciousness, as of the human beings, did not exist, there would be no meaning at all. To a consciousness that is universal, everything would be its own meaning, everything its own symbol. Yes or no? This division and combination has not been kept clearly when equating the aesthetics with the literary process, especially in analyzing a poem. And so Mardhekar says the intellectual and emotional aspects of intention are to be borne in mind. The intentional aspect of the word or language is of two aspects with respect to meaning. Number one, cognitive. Number two, affective. Cognitive would mean it is used in psychology. Though in psychology, there is no difference between the two, the cognitive and affective, because it is only when someone fails to find some original argument that he would remind others. But effective is associated with language. In language, a distinction is observed between the experience that is predominantly intellectual and the one that is predominantly emotional. Both can be distinguished as separately. Whereas psychology cannot differentiate between both, language differentiates between both. The two divisions of affective aspects of emotions can be understood very well in the following way. There are two divisions of affective aspects. Number one, pure or absolute emotions. Number two, contingent emotions. Pure emotions are the immediate accompaniments of the quality of a sensation or a pattern. They are sensuous and not due to experience of the world. For example, fear, love, anger, jealousy, they are truly aesthetic. But the contingent emotions are poetic and depend on human world order, our environment. They facilitate human reactions to the existing environment and ensure the survival. They change with the environment, they change with the society, and they change with the places. Yes or no? Say, for example, chivalry in the olden days is obsolete in the modern times. The parental emotion in Russia, where children are taken care by government, has become obsolete now. So, in psychology, it changes, whereas in actual world, it doesn't change. And so, the aesthetic emotions and the contingent emotions can be understood in the following way. The aesthetic emotions are disinterested, subserves no biological plan, whereas the contingent emotions are interested as they are biologically significant and are useful in the society. The aesthetic emotions are end itself. The end is realized the moment it is realized by the subject, whereas the contingent emotions are instrumental. They promote the ends which are outside the situations which realize the said emotions. The aesthetic emotions are significant in their own way, whereas the contingent emotions are many a time superficial and have to be grasped through words. And so, words have a sound as well as meaning. The meaning is intellectual as well as emotional, and emotional is aesthetic as well as poetic. Yes or no? So Mardhekar has very clearly distinguished between the words as sound and meaning, meaning as intellectual and emotion, and emotional as aesthetic and poetic. Now, what has this relevance to the medium of poetry? Words are implying both as sound and meaning is not poetry. Words can be said as poetry only if we understand emotional meaning of the poetic type with words. Emotional meanings are the medium of poetry. A poet works with these emotional meanings, and hence, words are not the medium of poetry, they are merely cognitive facts. Yes or no? Such poets are second rated. Either they want to become musicians but remain as poets or writers, or they are too intellectual with no emotion in them at all. And hence, Walter Raleigh, in his Wordsworth's monograph, very beautifully exemplifies: meditate often on these truths, that sometime or the other they may become your feelings. So, when you're reading a poem, by reading the sounds or by reading the words and getting the sound, that emotion should become yours, subjective. And hence, Walter Raleigh on Wordsworth says, he is a true mystic poet. Who? Wordsworth is a true mystic poet, making thought the food of his emotions rather than the emotions the food of his thoughts. So, Mardhekar claims that the emotion should be dominating than the thought. And if the thought is dominating, he either is not a poet or a second rate poet. Sound as sound has absolutely no place in poetry. That is the province of music. Sounds have only symbolic value in poetry as carriers of emotional meanings. So the words will have the sounds, and these sounds should carry the emotions of the poet, which will become universal even for us when we are reading it. Only then the poetry is first hand. If it just has a rhyme and rhythm and it has got a musical value, maybe this should be judged as a musical note and not as poetry, is what Mardhekar's opinion is. Sounds have only symbolic value in poetry, Mardhekar says, as carriers of emotional meanings and not intrinsic value as in music. Poetry becomes second rate and criticism becomes third rate if one considers sound to be the legitimate factor of poetic effects. Sound can add beauty to poetry, but sound is equal to poetry is not acceptable. What is poetry? Poetry is equal to emotional appeal. Sound can be a secondary. So rhyme and rhythm that we discuss in poetry should be secondary because they add a value in music and not in poetry. So the same meanings can be expressed by different combination of sounds in different languages or sometimes in the same language, also with synonyms. It is sound and sense that is important in poetry. Unless the beauty of sounds is transmuted into the beauty of emotional meaning, which is very important, by the mechanism of associations or otherwise, poetry is not superior. Merely the beauty of sounds in poetry is not the first class poetry, because sounds and musicality will add some benefit in or will add some aesthetic value in music and not in poetry. Poetry should have the emotional appeal and the emotional meaning, is what Mardhekar's claim is. He gives a number of examples in his essays, as we could find rhyme in Shakespeare and Dante. Rhyme and rhythm definitely are there in their sonnets, but definitely adding a value to the emotional appeal. Epic poets are greater than the writers of lyrics, Mardhekar says, not because they are more musical, but because they achieve larger, more complex, and withal more coherent, organized wholes of emotional meanings. It is the emotion that is more important. It is the emotional appeal of poetry that is more important to make it a first class poetry. It is ironical that in music, where sounds and sound patterns alone are significant, men will hunt for emotional meanings, which is wrong. A wrong way of judging music. Music should be judged with the sounds and the musicality of it and the sound patterns of it. But there we hunt for emotional meanings, while in poetry, where exactly we should look for the emotional meanings, we search for rhyme and rhythm. Both type of criticism of music, where we search for emotion, and poetry, where we search for sound patterns, both type of criticisms are wrong. In music, we should be searching for sound patterns, rhyme, rhythm. And in poetry, we should be searching for the emotional meanings of the words and not the sound patterns of the words. This is what is the contribution of Mardhekar to criticism. And hence, he gives an example, he gives a contrast: artist, medium, and beauty. When we apply this notion of artist, medium, and beauty to a painter will have the visual aspect of the world, thereby creates beauty with the help of color, line, strokes, mass, etc. Applying the same logic to poetry, the poet expresses the emotional meanings and thereby create beauty. And hence we can say painter is equal to pigments is equal to meaning. Poet is equal to words is equal to meaning. So meaning is more important. Which meaning? The emotional appeal and emotional meaning is important rather than the sound patterns. Combining both, we can say painter is equal to pigments is equal to colors is equal to beauty. Similarly, poet is equal to words is equal to meaning is equal to beauty. So it is the words and the meaning that are important. The words and the sound patterns in poetry is not important. The ambiguity in criticism of a poem arises because we make a common mistake to seek the meaning of colors in pictures as you seek the meaning of words in poetry. But as words are meant for meanings, pigments are meant for colors, and colors are not for meanings. No meaning, no words. Is as no meanings is equal to no colors. Is wrong, definitely. Yes or no? And hence, the mistake that has been done is the common mistake is find the meanings of colors in pictures as you seek the meanings of words in poetry. Yes or no? But as words are meant for meanings, pigments are meant for colors, not vice versa. Meanings are not meant for words, and pigments are not, colors are not meant for pigments. So colors are not fashioned by men to signify something. So no meanings is to no words, is as, but no meanings is to no colors. For example, green does not mean anything primarily. It is just a color, yes or no? We attach meanings. Green is equal to growth, green is equal to love, green is equal to affection, green is equal to a particular religion, and so on and so forth. The green color would still be green even if we don't attach any meanings to it. Yes or no? Even if we eliminate all these meanings of love, of religion, of growth, of affection, of emotion, still green will be green. Yes or no? But if we forget all the meanings of the word green, that combination of vowels and consonants would not exist in our vocabulary at all, and that is the problem with poetry. So, the real correspondence is not this. Meaning is to word is as meaning is to color. No. But rather, meaning is to word is as color is to pigment. Yes or no? You can ask what is the meaning of a color only if you ask what is the meaning of the meaning. Painter is to pigment is as colors is to meaning. Similarly, poet is to words is as meanings is to meaning. So it's a meaning that is more important in poetry analysis and not anything else. Just like colors are more important in analysis and nothing else. This is where we make a mistake because when we look at words, they have meanings and they are the carriers of meaning. When we look at pigments, we have colors and they are the carriers of colors. Meanings plus carrier of meaning is equal to word. Color plus carrier of color is equal to pigment. We make a mistake in analysis of the poetry by searching beauty of poetry in rhyme, in rhythm, which is actually belonging to the field of music and its analysis and not poetry and its analysis. Very beautifully, Mardhekar explains that in music we try to find the emotion, which is wrong. And in poetry, we try to find the sound patterns, which is also wrong. In music, the sound patterns are important. The musicality is important. The rhyme and rhythm are important. Whereas in poetry, the emotional appeal of the words is important and not the musicality. This is what is the expression of Mardhekar in his essay. And hence, to grasp that the sensation of aspect, that is the sound aspect of words, is purely symbolical. It is just a vehicle for meaning, not just as oil or water or paint is a vehicle for color. So, sound in one case and oil or water in the other case is just an instrumental. Although indispensable, are not essential to the creative process. This is very important to understand, says Mardhekar. Even though sound patterns are important to convey the emotional aspect, it is the emotion in poetry that is more important rather than the sound pattern. The same applies to all the other fine arts in terms of their several media. And hence, if we can have those understanding, then the creative process is like any other fine art of poetry. Thus, we can be saved from abstract art and representational art, intellectual poetry and emotional poetry, aesthetic art and mechanical art, and thus contribute to the best criticism of the best poetry. Such an unambiguous treatment of poetry, together with an analysis of the media of various fine arts, will bring a systematic unity in aesthetic theory without exception, says Mardhekar. Only this will yield principles which will hold valid for the entire field of artistic creation without any exception. I hope all of you agree with this aspect of Mardhekar. The science of aesthetics would stand alone without conflicting critical judgments then. And hence, we can distinguish emotions are the medium of poetry, which gives rise to the aesthetic emotion by the organization of all emotions, like all other fine arts. From aesthetic emotion evoked by beauty, by the perception of formal organizations, might be simply in virtue of their character of being formal organizations instead of being chaotic conglomerations, then. And hence, Mardekar very beautifully explains what exactly is the appreciation of poetry. It is the emotional appeal that is more important. Thank you very much for being a part of this video. Thank you very much for being a part of this video. Hope you have understood the theory of Bal Sitaram Mardhekar's poetry and aesthetic theory. Hope you have enjoyed it. See you in the next class. Bye for now. Namaskaram.